Hello everyone, welcome to the Orchid Hut. My name is Dana, and today I'm going to be potting the little tiny bag baby orchid that I purchased from my local home improvement store over the weekend. At the end of this video, I will put a link to that unbagging. And then in yesterday's video about media, I mentioned how I used certain medias to prepare a wooden slat basket for a potting like this. So I will also link that video at the very end. Just as a refresher here, this orchid is, on the label anyway, labeled as Rhinica stylus Vanda. So it's clearly an intergeneric hybrid type orchid. It looks like it has a common name of blue foxtail orchid, but on the tag itself it has a bit of a different name. So it's a cross between Vanda stylus Viboon Velvet crossed with Vascostylus 5 Friendship. So if there's anyone that has a better understanding of this naming, please leave me a comment below. And you know, I would imagine that probably all of these have even been renamed by now, so that will add to the confusion, I'm sure. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this. I've had this orchid now since Saturday, so that's, you know, like about 3 days. Each day I've been soaking the roots because it was a bit dehydrated. You can still see a little bit of the dehydration in the wrinkling of the leaves, but it has improved a lot since I purchased it. So we're going to be cutting this basket off first of all, and then preparing this wooden slat basket. I'm going to pot this like I do my other Vandas, and we will see how this goes. So I'm going to take my strong clippers here in order to remove this basket. I just really don't think there would be any other way to detangle all of these roots. It's likely to prove difficult because so much of this plastic is really tough. It tends to want to crack under the pressure rather than cut. If at any point this gets too tedious, I will fast forward the video. I'm just trying to cut the bottom portion away from the top portion, trying not to damage any roots as I go. Okay. So let's see if the top part will remove from the upper part of the plant. Makes it difficult when some of the roots have grown round and round. I'm likely fighting with a root that's going to get clipped off anyway because it looks to be more dead than alive. Okay, there's the top part gone. And let's see. Well, they did secure the bottom of the plant with a wire, with a twisted wire, so that's going to have to come off. When I pot today, I'm not going to have any wire on the plant. I will simply kind of weave the roots down in between the slats of the basket, and then I'll stabilize the plant with some media. And eventually, as the roots grow, they wouldn't really need the wire anyway. Okay, so I think it's going to need to be freed up in a few other places. And I thought the Tolumnia baskets were hard. It's a little bit difficult to see why it isn't free, but we'll just keep cutting until something releases itself. Okay, so let's see if we can get the roots out of this part. Okay, that's one piece. And, you know, in the big scheme of things, letting this orchid continue to grow in this plastic kind of open air pot, you know, there would be nothing in the world wrong with that. But when I purchase an orchid, I try to give it a little bit of an upgrade in the hopes that it has a sense of appreciation for the upgrade and maybe it will grow better for me. I know that sounds a little bit silly, but it's kind of related to like thinking if you wash your car, it's going to go down the highway better. Okay, unfortunately, lost a root there. Okay, so there are some dead roots here, and I often think that sometimes a good root trim is not a bad idea. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pruners. And we will, these were flamed from something else I did this morning, so they're sanitized. So we're just going to go ahead and cut away what appears to be papery and dead, like this. Although, as you go up this root, it still has some substance to it, so I'm going to cut it down below, and you know, when this orchid decides to grow again, that root could branch on. And I don't want to get too crazy here, but some are clearly dead. Now in just a little bit, when I spray this with the hydrogen peroxide, it will kind of get the full 3% dose because these roots are not wet. They've been drying since yesterday. Yeah, this root not in great shape, but I will leave it just in case it wants to produce more roots. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, we're going to take a short break so that I can get the hydrogen peroxide. And we'll go ahead and spray it. Okay. It does not hurt that I sprayed the basket. In fact, the fact that I don't see it fizzing or bubbling is a good thing. So these longer roots, I'm just going to let them kind of find their way in between the slats at the bottom of this basket. They may need a little bit of coaxing. And I'm trying to do this in such a way that the plant kind of has the longer roots going through the bottom of the pot in a balanced kind of way that will help support it somewhat. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so it has, you know, some roots coming out the bottom, which is fine. That's kind of what I'm looking for. I want it to grow more like a Vanda. Okay, now the next step is to get that bottom layer of sphagnum moss in the bottom of that wooden slat basket. And the purpose of the sphagnum moss is to kind of make like a little nest or a little bed down there. And it will keep the other media that I add to it from falling through, and it will also provide a little bit of humidity and moisture to the plant each time it's watered. Now, what I'm going to be using today is kind of some of this long strand, rather more expensive sphagnum moss. I use this for my Neo-Phoenicia pots. You do not have to have the most expensive long strand moss for this purpose. However, it's what I have, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. And I'm just putting it at the very bottom of the wooden slat basket so that it makes a little bit of a nest. And sometimes it falls on top of the roots, and sometimes it falls underneath the roots, but either way is okay. It was a little bit damp before I started. I want to make sure that none of the leaves are trapped. Okay, so you can press that down just a bit. So when this is finished, it looks something like this, and you can already tell that the little Vanda has some support there, and you really won't need to wire it. Okay, now the next step is kind of your choice, and you may just end up using what you have, which is fine. So in my case, I'm going to use what I have, and it's all three things that you could possibly use. So the first is large pieces of cork. And so I just place that around, and it will also tend to hold a little bit of moisture. It's not very weighty, so it's not necessarily going to help hold the plant down. So if you have this, I would put it next to the sphagnum moss because it will help retain some of the moisture. And then secondly, I'm going to put the large pieces of charcoal. Like I mentioned in my video yesterday, some people think this has antibacterial properties. I don't know if that's true, but it is a little bit weightier, and so it helps hold the plant down. And because that sphagnum moss is down there, it won't fall through. Okay, and then lastly, I have some pretty big chunks of pine bark, orchid bark, and I'll be putting that down next. This does have a little bit of weight to it, so again, it's helping stabilize the plant. Okay, so there we have it. The little orchid is in its new home. It is supported by the moss, the charcoal, bark, and the cork. It has its roots coming from the bottom. And the last thing, don't forget to put the tag back. So I just took my wood burning tool that I usually use to burn extra holes in the plastic pots, and I burned a hole through the tag and put a little wire through it. And there we have it, the finished Vanda. I hope you enjoyed this project and give it a try with some of your Vanda Alliance type orchids. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this project or learned something new, and the subscribe button will be in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. I reused a wire hanger from an older basket, and the Vanda is just catching a little bit of sun before the cold weather hits.